Hi friends, welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be the first of, I guess, a series that I want to be starting. And that series is titled the Graduate Reality Diaries. So basically I want to put together like a series of videos explaining the reality of some situations in grad school or the reality of some aspects in grad school, things that I necessarily wasn't expecting or things that I expected but aren't really the way they turned out to be. So today's video is going to be all about being a TA. Hopefully this will give you a better idea of what that is. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So for those of you who don't know, for those of you who are new here, my name is Oge. I'm a first-year graduate student at the University of Washington. I'm getting my PhD in astronomy/astrophysics, and I have been a TA for 2 quarters now. So here at the University of Washington, instead of having like the semester system where you have 2 semesters, we have 4 quarters, and the quarters correspond to the different seasons. By the time this video is posted, we will be in the spring quarter. So I TA'd in the fall quarter when I first got here, as well as the winter quarter. And as a PhD student, it is required that you complete at least 1 year of being a TA or a teaching assistant to get your degree. So what is a teaching assistant? It's exactly like what it sounds like. You are an assistant to a professor or faculty as they are teaching an undergraduate level class. Usually those classes that you are TAing for are typically like intro level classes. So anything from Physics 1, Astronomy 101, just like the very, very basics. All of the courses are supposed to be relatively easy and at the level that you can teach. So being a TA is really useful because if you decide to continue your journey into academia and become a faculty member, most likely you're going to have to teach classes. So it kind of gets you a good feel of how to prepare class, maybe how to give lectures, how to lesson plan, and so on and so forth. You can learn a lot from being a TA. If you don't like teaching or don't enjoy teaching like I do, then TAing might not be your cup of tea necessarily, but it is a requirement and it is very, very useful. Plus it gives you the chance to interact with other faculty that you may or may not have been able to work with. So you get to know other people within the department. Some expectations that you will have as a TA can vary depending on what institution you're at and some of the requirements that they have. However, there are some pretty like generic ones that I think account for most TAs no matter where you are. So one of them being grading is a pretty big one. Another one being a lab instructor. So if you're teaching like intro physics or physics 1, you are going to be the person standing at the front of the lab. You'll walk the students through the methodology of the lab, how to use some of the instruments, so on and so forth, make sure everything goes fine. Another requirement to being a TA could be lesson planning, so meeting with the instructor weekly to discuss some of the lessons that are going to be taught during the week. You might also help with creating some of the labs, creating some of the assignments. Another big thing that I think is pretty generic for every institution is going to be answering emails and hosting office hours. So office hours being a pretty obvious one, the professor will have their own office hours and then you will have your own office hours as a TA. So if students are struggling with the lab that they were given to the week, they can just attend your office hours, ask you any questions that they might not have been able to ask. Or they can also just come into office hours to ask you any questions that they have on homework help, exam help, so on and so forth. Answering emails though, as I mentioned, is another one. So if students don't come into office hours, then they can email you for any inquiries that they may have. I think those are pretty much like the most basic of the expectations that you have as a TA. However, I do know that there are some institutions that don't require you to be a TA. So if you are that institution, lucky for you. So I guess I will now kind of explain some of my own experiences with being a TA. So As I mentioned before, I've TA'd for 2 quarters now, the fall and the winter quarter. So in the fall, I was a TA for Astronomy 101, just your intro astronomy class, like what is a star? What is a galaxy? What is a black hole? Very easy stuff. And then in the winter quarter, I also TA'd for an intro astronomy course. This one was Astronomy 150, although it was more planetary sciences, so dealing with the planets, not as large of scale structures as you would deal with in 101. This course also had a little bit of geology in it, which I kind of thought was very weird and I was taken aback by. Astronomy 150, the geology-ish class, was in person, and Astronomy 101 was online. So I've experienced the best of both worlds, if you will. Both of them were okay, you know, they were whatever. I was happy to get the requirement out of the way, but I will say that I found both to be rather time consuming, only in the sense that, you know, I primarily came to grad school for research and I was hoping to get a lot of research done in my first year, but I did not. I definitely did not get as much done as I expected. Anyway, besides the point, TAing took up quite a bit of time is what I want to say. So being an online TA, it was fine. Like, I mainly thought that it was going to be grading and that was it. And I thought most things were going to be auto graded, so I didn't think it was going to be a lot of grading. However, the professor I was TAing for wanted me to interact a lot with the students. So all of those like discussion posts that, you know, you type out after answering a prompt or so on and so forth, it was required that I respond to most of the students in the discussion posts. And that was very, very time consuming because most of the students were saying the same thing. Like, let's be real. I know I was an undergraduate student at one point. Like, you just type in some BS answer, okay? You're not really thinking about much. So knowing that most of the students were gonna be typing BS answers, like, they're hard to respond to. Other thing that I didn't expect is to lecture the students for an online class. Like, I had to create lecture videos, coming up with lectures, and like doing the necessary research for this lecture, and then, you know, creating the video and editing the video, meeting the certain expectations that my professor had for the video was all in all very time consuming. There was a lot of back and forth, and I'm not really sure that I understood like his expectations for the video. I thought TAing was kind of going to be something I could do in the background, and it wasn't. It ended up taking a lot of time. Whenever I was TAing in-person classes, I had never stood in front of a class and taught anybody anything. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, you just went to a conference and gave a talk. I mean, yeah, that's fine, because everybody there, they're all professionals. They're all physicists. Like, they know how the universe works. Like, you don't have to tell them what a star is, right? But like, having to explain things to people who are seeing this for the first time, very difficult to do. There wasn't a class on how to be a TA. So walking in the first day of trying to give a lecture to my lab section, and keep in mind, we weren't necessarily doing lab assignment. I had to give a mini lecture to the students on like another topic that was kind of outside of class. Like, for example, there was a lecture on radioactive dating. Y'all, I do not know how radioactive dating works. I am an astrophysicist. I am not thinking about the radioactive decay of rocks and elements. That is not in my wheelhouse. So when I went to try to give this lecture, all the students were looking at me like I was crazy, because I'm just trying to like BS my way through this. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I've never seen any of this stuff. I also probably should have read up on it before I got there, but I didn't have any like proper training of like how to get through to students, or, you know, how to properly organize a lecture for the class and so on and so forth. So it was a nightmare. It's literally like learning on the job. Okay, so if you feel like you're unprepared as a TA, you're not the only one. I felt very unprepared, but at least the embarrassment is over. I've done it once, so I can do it again later. It's a bit harder than it looks, but once you get the hang of it, it's okay. So my experience being an in-person TA, It was all right, you know. It was definitely more time consuming than being an online TA for sure. Not only that, it was a requirement to go to the main class lectures with the professor, which I thought that was kind of strange too, because if the lab sections don't have anything really to do with the main lecture, why did I need to go there? So expect to be thrown in the deep end. Another thing that I did not expect was all of the crazy emails that you receive from students. Part of it, I think, is my fault. So this is where I'm going to look you in the eyes. Please be better than me. At the beginning of the quarters, I would usually tell students, you can email me at any time. I'm a graduate student as well. Like, I work far into the late hours of the night, which is true, you know, but I think that gave them too much liberty of thinking they can email me at 3 a.m. demanding that I respond. Don't do that. I've had students email me at the early hours demanding that I respond to them, or that they need help with something, they need an extension on assignment that was due at midnight, yada, yada, yada. I even had one student like email me constantly on a Friday night saying that he absolutely positively needed me to meet him in person on campus at 8 p.m. to help him with a lab. What? Definitely set boundaries in the beginning and let them know I am available from these hours to these hours. My office hours are these hours to these hours. Labs are this day at this time. If you can't make it to lab office hours, I can't help you. Like, I'd have students say, oh, I don't know how to do this. Like, I wasn't in class, so I can't do the lab. Well, babe, if you weren't in class or if you weren't in lab, I can't help you. Like, the time to come to class is when I tell you how to do the lab. Like, I would literally be giving students answers in the lab. I was an undergrad once. Sometimes it's really hard getting up and coming to class. But if you don't show me any effort, that you're not at least trying to come to class, I really can't do anything to help you. I'm so sorry. Another thing I did not expect is that a lot of your hours in the week go to meeting with your TA instructor. Every week, maybe a couple times a week or so. In my online class, I found that this was a couple times a week. But you have to meet with your instructor to go over like grading rubrics, just to check in on how the course is going, how students are acting, or sometimes they just want to see the material that you've come up with. Usually they try to keep your TA hours to a minimum per week. Like, I know at UW, I think it's like 18 hours a week, but you don't want to meet 18 hours a week. Like, that's the maximum, and it's a maximum for a reason, but you don't want to be TAing that much. I've never counted my hours, so I don't really know, but it might be somewhere around that with all of the expectations and responsibilities that I have. If I had to give any advice, it would be to set boundaries between you and your students at the very beginning of the quarter/semester. Try to practice giving your lectures ahead of time, or practice like being a lab instructor ahead of time if you possibly can. Review the material before going in, maybe the night before, a couple nights before, to make sure that you understand what you're teaching, so you're not teaching any students anything wrong. But if you do teach people the wrong things, it's totally fine. Like, my first week, I mistaught scientific notation because I was extremely jet lagged. But I mistaught scientific notation, and it's fine. You just have to make sure that you send an email out as soon as possible saying, here's the correct way to do it. Next time you meet with your section, go over that again to make sure everyone has an understanding. No big deal. Another thing is try to manage your time wisely. This was very, very hard for me, and I still struggle with it because I don't have a good balance at all when it comes to my responsibilities as a grad student. Being a TA, taking classes, and doing research all together, like, it's impossible to be good or have a good balance with all three. I mean, I'm not gonna say impossible because I'm sure there's some star-studded people out there who are doing it, but me, no. Okay, I completely neglected classes this quarter. Sorry to all my professors. I neglected all of my classes just so I could do a bit more research, and it was not smart. So, you know, out of the three, something's gotta give, you know. because you're balancing all of that along with just being a normal student. I think those are pretty much all of my tips. Hopefully I can make a couple more of these. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you are also a graduate student and have been a TA, feel free to leave some of your TA pet peeves. I'm sure you can probably guess a few of mine after listening to my rant. As usual, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye.